On the second day after the Jesus boy got to our school, Trevor was absent, and Ray Ray said it was because he broke his arm. Then everybody wanted to know how, crowding around Ray Ray to be the first one to get the information. He missed the fence, Ray Ray said. He was trying to jump from the big swings to his high fence that's like 3 feet away, and he wasn't swinging high enough. I told that jive turkey before he even jumped that he needed to be swinging higher than that, because even a fool knows you got to get some height to fly over the fence. When his mama was taking him to the emergency room, she said, "If your arm isn't broken, I'm going to break it, because I told you about jumping out of those swings like that." Everybody laughed, but it was hard for me not to imagine Trevor falling through the air. How scared he must have been, reaching and grabbing at nothing. I turned and looked at Samantha. She was shaking her head, but maybe she was thinking the same thing. In the summertime, Trevor's skin turned the prettiest copper brown. Once, when he was standing next to me at the park, I saw his bare arms up close, just hanging all quiet along his sides, and the skin, the way it had so many beautiful colors on it, the way it looked all golden somehow, stopped me. I stared at his arms and saw the Trevor that was maybe inside of the evil Trevor. Just a regular boy with beautiful skin. I saw that, even though he was mean all the time, the sun still stopped and colored him and warmed him like it did to everybody else. When I got to my desk, I looked up and saw the Jesus boy looking at me. I couldn't tell what his face was trying to say, but it was just blank and open and strange. I cut my eyes at him and opened my notebook, even though I didn't have to yet. Maribel's seat was right next to mine, or right behind mine. "That Jesus boy is always looking at you," she whispered. "Only way you'd know is if you're always looking at him," I whispered back. I felt her poke me in the back, but ignored it. I wrote my name at the top of the page. Beneath it, I wrote the date. Beneath that, I drew a picture of a kid on a swing. Kids said it felt like flying to jump through the air, catch onto that fence, then let yourself climb down. They said something about being up that high, let you see all over the place in a way that felt different than looking at the world from a window. I thought back to the day before when me and Sean were talking about those bridges he wanted to build. Some kids on this side of the highway were always trying to figure out ways to fly and run and cross over things and get free or something. Maribel was wearing a green sweater with the Casey School written across the front in white letters. The sweater was too small and there were tiny lint balls on it. Everybody always seemed to be thinking about some other place. I snuck another look at the boy. He was still staring at me. I stuck out my tongue at him and turned to a clean page. Miss Johnson came in, took attendance, and then she said, "Did everyone get a chance to personally introduce themselves to—" And then she said the new boy's name again, like she'd done the day before. But I don't remember it now, because the minute she called it, he stood up and said, "Everybody calls me Jesus, Miss Johnson." Some of the kids laughed. Most of us just looked at him. Miss Johnson looked around at all of us, and all of us found other stuff besides her to look at. "I like Jesus," the boy said, and sat back down. I don't know if he meant he liked Jesus the person or Jesus the name, but I guess Miss Johnson thought it was Jesus the name because she said, "Okay, Jesus." Her face just stayed calm, so we couldn't tell what she was thinking. "There's only 2 things wrong with that," Ray Ray said. He was sitting way in the back of the classroom, and everybody turned around real fast to look at him. For a minute, the only sound was chair legs scraping against the floor. "What's that?" Miss Johnson said. She was frowning now. Miss Johnson's a good teacher in a lot of ways. She laughs, and I like teachers who laugh, and once a week she brings some kind of snack for us all, like donuts or mini candy bars or cinnamon graham crackers or really sweet cherries. And she always seems to bring the snacks on a day when I'm the hungriest, which is usually a day when school lunch is the worst. Like on goulash day when they pour this stewy stuff that has things like green peppers and eggplant in all over perfectly good rice and completely ruin it. Whenever they have that, I ask if I could just have the rice, and Miss Costa always says no, like it's against some kind of school lunch law to serve goulash and rice separately. So on those days, I'm really hungry, and that's usually when Miss Johnson decides to pull out her snacks. The other nice thing about Miss Johnson is she always wants you to understand stuff. I mean, she doesn't just teach us, and if we don't get it, she keeps on moving. She really cares about us understanding things, and she'll take a real long time explaining something until she's sure everybody's got it. Sometimes that's a little bit boring if you already understand it and she's still explaining it. But that doesn't happen with me because I'm usually the last one to get it. The things I don't understand the most are science, math, grammar, and geography. I understand independent reading and journal time, and I understand the story part of writing, but not things like diagramming a sentence or semicolons. Anyway, that's why when Ray said what he said, Miss Johnson stopped taking attendance to ask him about it. She wanted herself and all of us to understand. What are the two things wrong with it, Ray? And that's another thing I like about Miss Johnson. Ray's name. It's really Raymond Rayson, but he decided he wanted everyone to call him Ray. When he told Miss Johnson that, she jumped right into calling him the name he wanted. Everybody calls me Franny, and so does Miss Johnson. But even if I would have said, call me Floydjoy McCoy from now on, Miss Johnson, my name would be Floydjoy McCoy. I guess it's strange that nobody ever calls me by my first name, Abigail, or even Abby. I guess it's because Sean can always almost say Franny. It sounds kind of crooked, like somebody saying it underwater, but we know what he's saying, and maybe that's why it stuck, because of him.
Ray leaned back in his chair. He was wearing this big shirt that said "Black is beautiful," with a black hand making a black power fist underneath the words. The shirt was too big for Ray. He's real skinny, so when he wears big clothes, mostly you see the clothes, not Ray. He slouched down in his seat and just about disappeared into that big shirt. Well, first of all, he said, Jesus wasn't a boy, and he was like God's son, but not a man either. Like a thing type person, like a spirit guy. Miss Johnson and the rest of us just looked at him. And second of all, he wasn't white. He was like spirit colored or something. What's spirit colored? His friend Chris asked. I never heard of no spirit color. I could see Ray's little head inside his big shirt. He was frowning. Like the color of air, brother man. You know, like no color. When those cats put nail on him, he bled, though, somebody else said. What color was his blood? Ray shrugged. Right on, my brother man. I feel what you're saying. Blood is red no matter who is coming out of. But that ain't where I'm going, you see? That kid ain't Jesus, is all I'm saying. Say, brother, the kid said, which was jive talk for, I agree with you. Say, brother, I signed underneath my desk, then looked down at my hand. I had a pockmark on the center of each palm left over from the time I had the chicken pox. The marks were small and reddish-brown. Sometimes when I was thinking about something real hard, they started itching. Maybe in another world, somebody would have thought they were nail holes. I don't know. Mama lost one baby before I was born. Her name was Lila, and she died when she was a month old. Something about her lungs, something about her blood. We don't talk about her much, but there are pictures. Sometimes Mama kisses my palms and calls me God's gift. I wondered what the inside of the Jesus boy's hands looked like. I wondered if his mama kissed them and called him silly names. Of course, when I looked up, he was staring at me again. Old, big eyes. He's not saying he's Jesus, right? Ray asked. He's saying that's like some nickname. I know this Spanish guy named Jesus, but it's pronounced the Spanish way, not like the real guy. This kid ain't saying he's the real guy, right? I mean, how is he going to be God's son and be in Miss Johnson's class? No offense, Miss Johnson, but even if that Jesus boy was spirit-colored, he wouldn't be coming to Price. If he was really God's son, he'd probably go to a private school. Like where? Maribel said. The Casey school closed. There's not any private schools on this side of the highway. If there was one, I'd be going to it. Or like Catholic schools, somebody else said. Someplace with some religion, right? I saw Miss Johnson smile a little bit. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying about himself, everyone. Are you? Miss Johnson and everybody else looked at the Jesus boy. He didn't move or shake his head or anything, just sat there, staring off. Are you? Ray asked him. You aren't saying you're like God's son, are you? I don't think it matters, Miss Johnson said. What matters is, aren't we all God's children? Samantha said quietly. She looked around the room, taking us all in. Each of you, she said, is a true child of God. She turned to the Jesus boy. Maybe some are truer than others. Ray Ray just looked at her and shrugged. Jesus don't belong in this room is all I'm saying. And that cat's saying he's He stopped talking and stared at the Jesus boy and frowned. Then we all looked at him. He had his hands on his desk and was looking down at them. I saw a tear fall onto his pale hand, and then another one, but he wiped them away real quick. I heard myself saying, "He's crying, Miss Johnson. The Jesus boy is crying." "Dag," Ray Ray said. "I didn't mean to make him cry. I swear, Miss Johnson. I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just saying, I'm not crying," Jesus boy said real fast, shooting me a look that was so evil I couldn't believe it came from his face. "Are you all right?" Miss Johnson asked, her hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, I'm okay," the Jesus boy said, his voice soft again, so soft that maybe some of the kids didn't hear him. "I lived on the other side of the highway already," the Jesus boy said softly. He kept looking down at his hands like he was talking to them, like he was talking to himself. My family didn't belong there." He looked up and around at each one of us. I felt like everything stopped. There weren't tears in his eyes, but they were sad. "My daddy said it would be better here," he said, almost whispering. He said people would be, nice to me." He looked down at his hands again. After a minute, he put his head down on his desk and sighed. We all stared at him, and Miss Johnson bent down and whispered something in his ear. He nodded, and she put her hand on his back and led him out of the room. As he walked out the door, I could see that his face was all squinched up, but his hands were just flat and calm, hanging down at his sides. Then he sniffed, and his face just sort of sagged. I put my head down on my desk and closed my eyes. "Is he some kind of crybaby or something?" I heard someone ask. "Nah," I heard Ray Ray say softly. "You heard the brother, man. He's just like a little bit lost. It bees like that sometime." "Right on," I heard somebody else say. "It bees like that." Usually when Miss Johnson left the room, we lost our minds with talking and jumping around and throwing things at each other. Backflips, and usually did them in the aisle. But that day he just sat quietly in his seat, rolling his pencil slowly back and forth across his desk. That day, the room was completely quiet. It was like we were all glued to our seats. It was like somebody had come into the room and gently lifted our tongues right on out of our mouths.